I was born July 27th, 1972 in Litchfield, Kentucky. My childhood was a little different than most. My mom left me when I was 3 days old. My father took me home where I was raised by him and my aunt and my mom. My mother came in and out of my life for the next 9 years. The first memory I have of her is me lying about how my head got split open. She was very abusive toward me. Within the next 9 years, her abuse was criminal. It wasn't until I was 9 that the abuse stopped. It took her hitting me with her car and breaking my pelvis for the abuse to stop. That's when my dad found out about all the times she abused me. She spent a little time in prison for running me over, but the abuse led to my first substance abuse, pain meds. By the time I was 11, I was smoking marijuana with my older brothers and cousins. At age 12, I took my first drink. By 13, I was smoking marijuana, taking Tylenol 3s, and eating mushrooms. At about 14 or 15, I began using hydrocodone and using cocaine. When I was 15, I met a boy. I thought I was in love for the rest of my life. Fast forward 2 years, I was pregnant with his baby. I gave birth to my son November the 18th, 1989. Same day he was born, I had to give him back to God. He only lived a few hours. Little did I know then that God was with me. A couple of weeks after his death, the abuse started by his father, which lasted for about another year. We finally broke up, and I thought I was finally done with him. I met another man when I was 20 that I married and had a daughter with. But 8 months after she was born, I found the love of my life, crystal meth. I remember the first time I done any of that. March of '94, I sat my baby on the floor of the bedroom and snorted the first line of meth. I was off and running. It wasn't long after that that I let that take over my life. I was leaving my daughter with her grandmother and her aunt all the time because I wanted to get high. During the next few years, I let my son's father back in my life. That eventually caused my marriage to end. During this time, there was a lot of abuse by him, but I stayed with him because of guilt until the night he was arrested. But my life was a mess then. I was now divorced, had a 10-year-old daughter, and I was an addict. The next 2 years was a blur, but I met another man, became pregnant by him, and had my second daughter. We got married, and I thought that life would change. Well, it didn't. We both were addicts. Even though we both worked and had a life that looked good on the outside, we was together for 13 years. And finally, we couldn't keep it together, so we divorced, and I let my son's father back in my life. Of course, the abuse started again, this time a little worse than before. We ran hard for about 2 years, long enough for me to get charges that cost me 4 years of my freedom. I thought that was the end of us, finally, but I was wrong. 2 weeks after I got out, he contacted me. He was sober, just finished a year at the Hope House. I was sober, and we met up, and we thought maybe this time things would be different. They was for about 6 months, and then he started using again. Not long after that, the abuse started again. I still held on. I stayed sober for about another year, living with his abuse. Then after this one night of him attacking me, I decided I didn't want to feel anything anymore, so I started using again. The abuse continued. I finally had enough, and I was trying to stay away from him. But on October 8th, 2004, I was at Lampkin Park playing with my grandkids. My daughter had come up for a visit, and I was playing with my grandkids. And back last the spring of 2024, I had backed into a light pole and messed up the tailgate on my SUV. And my father's son was the one that changed the tailgate, hooked up the locking mechanism. Well, I thought I was staying away from him, but little did I know he was living in the woods at Lampkin Park. When I go to leave Lampkin Park that night, he raises up out of the third row seat of my SUV, which would next be a night of terror for me. somewhere or another, he restrained me. He took over driving. He drove for 8 hours with me restrained, and he abused me for the next 8 hours, torturing me mentally, physically, and emotionally. He drove all the way to Florida, and the abuse was so bad that it was about 5 o'clock in the morning, and he pulls into a state park, and he finally releases me, and he tells me to go into the bathroom and clean up a little bit. Well, I was in total shock by this time, because a lot had happened to me, a lot. And when I got back in the car, he didn't restrain me. And I started praying because he was telling me he was going to kill me. And he was trying to calm me down. He was rubbing the back of my head, telling me it was going to be okay. It wouldn't hurt. It wouldn't take long. And I started praying, and I was praying so hard. And I kept asking God, just get me out of this, please, God. If you get me out of this, I will follow you wherever you lead me. And he reached over and he grabbed me. And then he let loose real quick, and I heard a voice say, go. And I know I heard that voice. I opened the door, and I jumped out of the car between Fort Walton Beach and Destin, Florida. I was unconscious. Luckily, I was found by a first responder that morning. I spent 2 days at Fort Walton Beach, Florida Hospital. And they took me to a homeless shelter in Pensacola. I'd never been in anything like that before in my life. I didn't have a phone. I didn't have no ID. Well, I had my ID, but I didn't have a phone. I didn't have nothing with me to get in contact with anybody up here. So the only thing I needed to do was ask them to Google the number for Goodwill, because I have a friend that works at Goodwill. And I knew he would know how to get in touch with my daughter. So I got the number to Goodwill, and I called Goodwill. And Jim answered the phone, and he talked to me for a little while, and he asked me could he put me in contact with these people. Well, just a few minutes after that phone conversation, I got another phone call from the National Anti-Human Trafficking Coalition for Domestic Violence and Sexual Abuse. They were located out of Nashville, Tennessee. They flew to Pensacola, picked me up, took me to Nashville. This was October of last year, and put me in a safe program down there called the Life Recovery Program at the Natural Rescue Mission, which is a wonderful program. But there was an incident where I had to come back to Kentucky. On the day I had to come back to Kentucky, I was scared to death. I didn't know what I was going to do, where I was going to go. I couldn't go to my daughter's house because it was just too much of a chance because I didn't know where he was at. And my coordinator of the Life Recovery Program came to me and said there were some people from Bowling Green there at the Life Recovery Program during the tour that day. And told me, they called it the Hope Center. They said the Hope Center from Bowling Green. They didn't know it was the Hope House. And would I be interested in their program? And I said, I don't know, because that's where he went. And I was scared. But then they came back to me and they told me that Justin Crow had said to put his name on the application. So I went and prayed about it. And I prayed about it. And I filled out the application. And the next morning I was really devastated, just didn't want to leave Nashville, scared to death. And I don't know if any of y'all ever heard the term wrestling with God when you get down as low as you can go. And you start praying. You start praying that he's going to send you, and you made a promise that you would follow him wherever he leads you. And I just prayed, and I prayed that God was going to lead me someplace safe. And while I was on that floor praying, I got a phone call. They came and got me. I picked up the phone, and the voice was so sweet. It said, "Is this Becky?" And I said, "Yes." She said, "This is Harley from Hope House." So a few days passed. Harley came and got me, brought me to Bowling Green. When I first got to Hope House, I didn't really want to be there because I didn't feel safe, because I didn't know where he was at. I was scared to death. But little did I know God wasn't done with me yet. Because I finally accepted the fact that I was at Hope House and that I was going to be safe. Because of Stephanie and Harley making me feel that way and telling me that he would not get to me there. And I believe that. And I believe God led me here. And then I started getting into the Bible studies with all the wonderful ladies that come in there and pour into us. And I started learning about Jesus and what he'd done for me. And I started to accept the fact that I deserved more than what I had let that man put me through for 35 years. And with that, they let me heal. Hope House just let me heal. They let me heal the way I needed to heal. And when I needed them, they was there. When I needed to talk to one of my Bible study teachers, they were there. And I just don't know. I don't know where I would be today if it wasn't for Hope House and all the people that's poured into me. And I love each and every one of you beautiful, beautiful ladies that's poured into us. And I want to be like you all. That's what I want to do with my life. And I know through God that that's possible. And I told you I was going to make it short and sweet. And you got a little backstory on me, and then you realize God does miracles. Yeah.